Hey gang, Voltie here with another deck tech. Today's deck is going to be 4-color Titan Control, not Primeval Titan, but you'll see in a second. This is going to be one of the only control decks that I've made in the 8-point space, just because obviously losing some of the RL cards is a big deal, and not being able to fetch lands that make the colors that you need on time can be an issue for a control deck, where it's less impactful for a mid-range or an aggro deck, but let's get into it. So to start us off, we've got our Planeswalker package here. These are going to be the ways that you get incremental value over the course of the game. Red and 6 obviously picking up our lands every turn, and Comet Stellar Pup, which has the ability to win the game by itself, but can also pick up interactive pieces that you've played over the course of the game, if that's what you roll. So that's 3 of our points. We've got Wandering Emperor. It's the best Planeswalker that's been printed for control decks in a very long time, mainly because it has flash, but I just genuinely think this card is underplayed at the moment in Highlander, and more people should be giving it a spin. And then Narset and Teferi, nothing too crazy there, pretty standard blue-white X control deck cards. And now we get to the creatures. This is where the name Titan, or a giant control, comes from, or Titan control. Flage and Uro are 2 of the 3 escape creatures that have theoretically infinite value attached to them. What's notable about the printing of Flage, though, is that now we have 2 of these creatures that are more control orientated, as both of these have the ability to gain you 3 life, and that's a pretty big deal when you're trying to stabilize, especially after you've had an early game where you've interacted with your opponent a fair amount. So I expect these cards to be very high impact over the course of most of your games that you're playing this. There might be some tension where you'll have to choose which of them to cast. I'll give you a hint. Uro costs you 2 points and Flage doesn't cost you any, so if you have the ability to cast both, I'd probably fire up the Uro. Omnath is here as well. I think fair Omnath is a little bit underexplored. We've mostly seen Omnath in Time Walk decks, and that's because, having Nissa Resurgent Animist and a bunch of elementals, and having extra turns with Omnath is a huge deal, but at the same time, playing it, drawing a card, cracking a fetch, and playing a 5-drop is still a valid play pattern, and that's something we have access to. Solitude and Fury Randata creatures. These are both spells that have kicker later in the game, and you can use them to clean up the board and make sure that you're not dead. They're also both very reasonable threats, and there's quite a lot of cards that have been put in the deck to support being able to evoke both of these. In our sorcery slot, we've got 3 sorceries that draw cards, 1 that kind of draws cards, a removal spell, and Wrath of the Skies. There is a small energy package, but I think casting Wrath of the Skies for like 2 is perfectly reasonable. Obviously, if you get to blow up several things because you've generated energy in a different way, then that's a bonus, and I think this card is going to be seeing more and more play over time, especially as more energy cards get printed. We move on to the instance. This is where the bulk of our non-land cards are, obviously, as a control deck. We've got some cantrips, we've got some counter spells, we have a bunch of removal, and then we have 2 card draw spells that can also serve to ramp us, which gets us closer to kicking those Titans, Planar Genesis and its little brother Growth Spiral. You'll see as well Force and Mana Drain in our points, as well as in our counterspell suite. Mana Drain doesn't have too many things you can dump mana into, but it does have 1 incredible card that you can put that mana into, which is the One Ring, which is our last point. It's a broken card. It's broken in every single format that people are playing it in. Notably, in this deck, we have 2 ways to get consistent life gain, which is Flage and Uro, and we have a couple of ways we can reset the One Ring, like Teferi Time Raveler, so that we don't die to it. This card has also been showing up, obviously, in the Time Walk decks, but I think normal, fair One Ring decks are a little bit underappreciated. And so I think this is going to be the haymaker that closes out most of your games. We then have Dress Down and Leyline Binding as some removal spells, and then our mana base. Our mana base has a Boseiju to go with the Renin 6, but otherwise it's a pretty stock Fetch, Shock, and Triome and Surveil Land mana base that you've been seeing in a lot of my 8-point decks. In our sideboard, there's nothing too crazy. We have access to 4 blasts, so we're going to play them. Field of the Dead is here as a concession to the control matchups. If they have the ability to answer most of your cards, especially permanently, having a way to end the game and, relatively easily close out is nice at the cost of a sideboard slot. I don't think it would stay in once the deck gets optimized, but it's a cute pet card of mine, so it's in here for now. We have an Extract, a Carpet for the blue decks, Pick Your Poison as a general removal spell, Path to Exile and Celestial Purge for specific archetypes, Graveyard Hate, Artifact Hate, Creature Hate, and Dovin's Veto as the best negate variant that we have access to. So nothing too crazy in the sideboard. We do have access to 4 colors, so you can play whatever you'd like. If you want to tune it to your local metagame and play an Oof and a Stony Silence, for example, by all means go for it. But otherwise, I'm really excited to try something like this. Having Flage and Uro give you such a potent endgame, especially against the mid-range decks, is not something we've seen in a while. In Highlander, anyway. Obviously, any constructed deck that had access to 3 or 4 Uros had the ability to close out those games, but in Highlander, the next best thing was Croaxer, and that card's terrible. So having Flage, which also helps you stabilize, alongside Uro is going to be really high impact, so I expect to see a little bit of them. That's it for the deck. This video was brought to you with the help and support of my patrons. If you'd like to support me and my content or see your name up here on screen, feel free to click the link below. If you like the content, hit the subscribe button if you can. I'd very much appreciate it. It matters more than you'd think. At the moment, you can see here, my subscribe count isn't too great, but hopefully that'll pick up in the future. Leave a like if you like the video, and I'll see you all next time.